Hi everyone, and welcome to this new 2.15 live stream.
Hi. Hello.
And Happy New Year, everyone. So in this video, live stream actually, we'll go over the new long-term support version and what this means for you. So I'll go briefly into details over that. I'll be presenting a few features in a presentation, PowerPoint presentation, and at the end of the video, we will go into a live demo of some of the new features for the editor. And at the end, I'll also be showing some new debug draw helpers that are useful. So the first news is that 2.15 is now the new long-term support version. So what it means for you is that potentially can be a new release candidate. So if you are using 2.13 or 2.14, you can be confident to upgrade to that new version and use that for shipping. We'll be maintaining this version as long as needed. So if it takes a year or two to be fully stabilized, even though we are confident it's already stabilized, but there are always bugs to fix. We will be maintaining it for a long time, and 2.9 is going to be discontinued. So yeah. So new features. The editor and project setting preferences, you now have a new search bar. So it's a small addition, but I feel it's useful. For each of the panels, you also have a small description that you can see here. So also a nice small thing. But the main thing is for SDK integrators and actually even the Unity and Unreal 3D plugins, is that you can configure which features are enabled for your productions. It's in the project settings. So for example, if you want to disable mesh renderers or like texture sampling for your project, and you don't want the artist to use those features in any effect, it's implemented by default. Let's say if the VisualFX artist imports a package from the marketplace using an track samplers and it's disabled for your production, it will be explicitly displayed as an error or as a warning. And if they want to use place a node like an in-track sampler node in the graph, it's by default hidden, whatever is enabled. In the texture editor, so it was already present in 2.14. If you open the texture and it had a pk80 file, so an atlas file of the exact same name in the same folder. So for example, here it's a blastpack.extended texture. If it founded a pk80 file of the same name, it was displaying a preview. So we just extended that to be a configurable path and also a subdivision count like you can find on the billboard renderer, for example. By the way, the green, not squares, but the green outlines are the training informations. They are not implemented in PopcornFX editor, but some SDK integrations can use it. Finally, it's not, just as a disclaimer, this is not having any impact on the texture sampler node or the viewport renderers right now. It's only for the preview, but maybe at some point we'd like to have UIUX a texture. If it has the atlas stored saved, it would automatically be an atlas texture. But right now it's only for preview. Minor details also in the mesh viewer. So if you have an FBX file containing several animations, you can specify the ID of the animation you want to import. It's a minor thing, but it can be useful. In the curve editor, there are several things actually. So if you hold the Control, Alt, or Shift keyboard modifiers, it will display the shortcuts associated with those modifiers. But also if you press the left, actually any button from your mouse. So yeah, if you change, for example, in the editor settings, your shortcuts, it's correctly updated and so on. So I'm trying to pick up with the GIF. So this button here, which is a lockpad icon, if you press it, you can select a few keyframes. I'll go over it when the GIF loops, but if you select a few keyframes, it will edit and move one tangent. It will move all of the tangents at once. So in some situations, it can be useful. By default, it's best to have that toggled off. Yeah, it's going to display it now. So you can use either that button, or if it's disabled, hold the Shift keyboard modifier to move them all at once. You can also snap some keyframes to another dimension. So here it's showing how to snap the X, actually selected keyframes on the Z axis. And the last thing is that if you apply a preset, so previously, if you apply the preset, it was applying the preset to all, it was overriding your entire curve basically. Now you can apply a preset to only the active channels here. And yeah, finally, in terms of attributes, so we added 3 different types of attributes, or actually 3 different modifications. So you can finally use editor-only attributes, which are strict in shipping. If you select an attribute and you make it, so I think it's isLocal or isPrivate, I can show that in the demo after. And once it's imported in the final engine, or even in shipping in the editor, it gets stripped away. And you see a small color cue, it's grayed out, so it's completely stripped. There are also enumeration attributes that you can see here, and button attributes, which are just you press it, and it's not a toggle, but a one-off thing. So depending on the if you create like master effect or master templates, it can be very useful. Yeah, so we will go into a live demo where Raphael will show some various editor improvement features. Paul will go over some new templates and notes after that.
Okay, so I will now do a live demo of some of the new UI and UX improvements that come with the 2.15 version. So first of all, before this version, when you drop the node, just like this multiplier node here, and you wanted to edit an auto value, here you can see it's set to auto type. You either had to plug in something, to wire in something, or to change the type. And now you can already, you can instantly just change the value, like here I type 2, and it makes the value become a float already. So you don't have to, select the type beforehand. You can easily edit them here. Another cool feature that allows you to edit faster your values is that now if you hold Control and click over a field, like a value field, you can either drag right and left or drag up and down, depending on what your preferences are. It works the same way to change the value. So it's an easy way to quickly change the values without having to type them in. This can be used, everything that you see here, there's a link to the value fields, can be used everywhere in the FX editor. So it can be here in the properties, here in the effect interface where you have like your attributes, it can work the same. Okay, so here you can also see how this will work for a mesh, for instance. Here, if I want to change a value, I can edit here this way. But what is a cool addition here is that this value is here. So this float 3 is considered as a mesh scale, as a 3D scale. So I have this padlock icon here that if I lock, I can the same way edit one value, and it will broadcast the value to all the values of the float 3. So it's an easy way to edit your 3D scale values to make sure to have a uniform scaling. And of course, you can unlock the pad and then go back to single edit mode. Another thing here that we changed is that this Dropbox for asset selection, be it meshes, textures, or whatever kind of assets you want, used to be not very intuitive, so it changed a little bit. Now, if you want to open the Windows Explorer, you have to click this folder icon here. If you want to open to have access to all of the resource types in your project. So here it's a mesh, so you have access to all the meshes in your project. You simply click this icon here, and you have access to everything. And as before, if you want to to open the mesh viewer or texture viewer or whatever, you only have to hold Control and click, and it opens here the mesh viewer. So that's a handier way to work with your meshes and all assets actually. If you like to have several layouts while working on different things, like if you are working on with the timeline or with the more with the viewport or with the effect graph or whatever, you can now in the edit tab find the layout tab, save and load layout options. And here I saved some previous layouts. So if I want to switch to this one, like that I call my layout, it instantly switches. And if I want to switch back to any other layout, I can go back to the one I call default, and it switches back to it. So you can now easily switch between workspaces easily. There is a new addition here with colors. So it's not a big change, but it's to make your life easier when working with colors. So wherever you click on the color node, so it can be here, I can right click and hold copy. I can go, for instance, to another color panel. So here in the billboard renderer, hold right click and copy color. Sorry, and paste color. Sorry, my bad. Here I can copy it, and I can paste the value easily. The same thing goes for here. I can go here, copy the color, and paste it wherever I want.
And also everywhere you have a color.
Yeah, so everywhere you have a color, basically, you can do that. So even here, if I go on the color picker, here, I can paste it. So it works pretty well and it's supposed to make your life a bit faster when working with colors. Now, in case you want to select everything in your effect that is upstream or downstream a certain node, you can do that by holding the home or end buttons. So if I hold the home button and left click this button, it selects everything that is upstream of the node. And if I want to select everything that is downstream, I only hold the end button and it selects everything that is downstream, so to the right basically of this node. So it can be useful if you want to select everything at once and move it around or just copy it. Or
I think you don't need to actually hold, just have whatever is selected, just pressing one time and it should
actually yes, okay, it's a no need to hold the key then. Thank you. So one small change here is that what used to be here on the viewport in the toolbar to debug your values, I will turn this to white, has now moved to the node graph here with this little glasses icon that you can see at the top. So if you are paused in your viewport, you can hit the glasses icon. It will enter the debugging mode, so you can see the debugged values of the particles that are selected. And here you can see that we'll have, this red particle here is the one that is selected. And here with those two arrows, I can switch between particles. So here you can see the red one that is selected. So I can switch between the debugged particle and have this value change, or whatever value you want to have debugged. So this existed already, but it just changed places. And yes, so you saw that with the curves editor already, but it's the same here. Whenever you're in the viewport, if you hold any modifier for a few moments, you can see here I'm holding Control, and you can see all the associated shortcuts. Same goes with Alt, Shift, and all of the click buttons. So you can easily have a reminder of whatever your shortcuts are when you're working, which can turn pretty handy. And the last thing I want to show for the editor updates here is that if you're working with a mesh backdrop, previously you were limited to only having one a diffuse map in addition to your mesh, and now you can also have here a normal and a rough metal path for adding normal and metal maps. So here you can see that our custom mesh has a bit more depth to it because we have those scratches that are working well with the normal maps. So it can just help you give a bit more life to your backdrops. That is all for the general editor UX and UI improvements. And now, Paul, we switch to the new templates and nodes that have been added to the editor.
Yes, so yeah, I'll talk a bit about the new templates improvement in 2.15. And so I start by opening a random effect here. So the first template that was added is the round template. So this is basically a helper that allows you to round a value depending on its different parameters. So you can set it up just as a seal or floor or trunk, or you can round to the closest value. So it can be a very helpful, useful helper for creating your effects. Some other changes in the templates in the remap node. So before, if you were inputting a value that was not contained in the range of the old mean and old max values, the output could be outside of the bounds of the new mean and new max values. So we just added this small checkbox clamp here. So it's a pretty useful helper because generally you don't want the output of your remap to go over your max or under your mean values. So before you had to chain the remap with the clamp, but now it's completely handled in the template. So it's same thing, a small addition to make your life easier. Another template change we made is that in the events multiplier node, we now have the kill Boolean input, and you can actually plug a subgraph here to add a specific condition to kill the multiplier. So here you can have like an infinite duration for your multiplier node and have some other logic to kill and stop the emission of particles. So for example, it can depend on particle interactions or like a spatial layer or something, or raycasts to stop the emission depending on your own logic. So that can be pretty useful to avoid having multipliers when they are infinite going on forever. So one other small addition we made to the editor is that in this overview panel here, we now have the spatial layer data, where you have the list of the spatial layers that are used in your effect, their different properties, their payloads, etc., etc. So this is like a quick summary of all the spatial layers used in your effect. Can be pretty useful to have like the overview of your effect. And another template, so more on the side of the whole template system improvement, you can now deprecate a template. So I'll show you that with the physics template. It's not a good idea to do that in your own project because it's one of the templates of the core lib, but it's just to do like a quick demo of how this works. So basically, you can select your template here in your effect preview, and you now have the deprecated button, and you can check it. And when this is checked, the template will be considered as deprecated, meaning that now if I save this and I go back to my main effects, you will have a warning on your effect stating that the template physics is deprecated here. That can be useful if you have your own template libraries and you want to make sure that no one uses an old template anymore that you've updated, for example. So you can just deprecate it and it will even not appear anymore in the menu to drop nodes. So artists will not be able to drop this template anymore. And if they actually do, they will have this warning. Can be pretty useful for production and making sure that only the templates that you want are used in your project. So uncheck that because we actually want the physics template to be deprecated in this case. We've added, so one interesting features we've added in 2.15 is the ability to generate random values using seeds. I got a small sample effect, small tutorial effect here that shows how this works. And basically, we've added this node, which is a random from seed, in which you can input an integer value, which is the seed, and it will output a float value in the range specified here. So here, for example, I use the emitted count divided by 10 as a seed. So it means that every 10 particles will have the same seed, and then it will change for the 10 next particles, etc., etc. So you can see in this effect that, yeah, I'm generating here an angle that is then used as the velocity of the particles. So you can see here that you have 10 particles, batches of 10 particles going the same direction because they all have the same seed for this random angle. So all the 10 particles will go in the same direction. In this example, I also use this random from seed to generate a random color depending on the actual position of the particle. So to do that, we have some seeds from float nodes in which you can input float. So you can actually input float, float2, float3, float4, and it will output an integer that you can use as a seed for the random from seed. So yeah, in this case, I'm using the position of the particle. I discretize the position of the particle, so it creates sort of a grid of seeds. And I use those seeds to generate a new U value for the color. So you can see that each cell, so I discretize using 2, so you get like cells of 2 by 2 units here. And you can see that for each cell, particles have the same color because they will generate the same value. So the use of this feature is to be able to generate the same values on different layers or in different particles. So we have a few examples here with particles being attracted by a point. And we're not using spatial layer here. It's just that each particle will regenerate the attractor position and color, and they will try to, they will be attracted to this random position that changes every 5 seconds in the case of this effect. So I can show you quickly the templates that does that. It takes the age of the effect, discretize it so that we have the same value every 5 seconds. This value will only change every 5 seconds. We use this value to generate a seed, and then this seed is used to generate a random position and a random color. And this random position will be used as the attractor position here, and the random color as the particle's color. Yes, so this allows you to do pretty cool effects. I'll just show you quickly. We have a Voronoi effect here showing a use case of this random from seed feature. So basically here we subdivide the space in the grid, and for each cell in this grid we generate a random position and just do like a Voronoi noise using those random from seed because each cell can query the random position of its neighbors. So I won't go into details for this effect, but just know that it's something that you could not do before without using tricks or special layers in this case. And last but not least, we added the equivalent of what was the shape collection in v1. So in v1, you were able to sample not just from one mesh, but from a collection of meshes, and sample positions or uniformly on those meshes. And in v2, it was not possible yet, and you had to actually specify a single submesh in your mesh in your sampler data shape node. So you had to specify a specific submesh and a specific LOD level, and the shape sample node will the shape sample node would only sample this specific node. And so we've added a bunch of different modes for the sampling, and you can now sample multiple submeshes from those nodes. So either all submeshes at a specific LOD, or all submeshes from the whole mesh and all LODs from the FBX file. So this can be useful if you want to sample a bunch of meshes at once and have a good uniform sampling on that. And I think that's it for the templates and other improvements that for me. And I'll let you go talk about the debug draw values and the switch node in the editor.
Yes, so we've added a new built-in switch node that you can use basically in a replacement for if you were using chained ifs. If you had, for example, a value that you were comparing against several values previously. I mean, in the previous versions, you had to chain several ifs together, so chaining the outputs of the first in the input of the second, and so on and so on. So there's now a new built-in switch node. Basically, it takes number of inputs. It's actually the number of comparison it's going to do. So it's going to compare the input value against each of the cases. It's going to do a strict equal comparison. So here I have only two cases. It will compare 1 against 0 and 1. And if it's equal to the first one, it will output case 0, so the value associated with that case equal condition, basically. It will output it here. The reason why you have an additional 1 is that you will always have a default case value input as input. Here is another example where it's comparing a 2-dimensional integer against 4 values, and you had 4 case outputs and always a default value. Small detail, if you have an enumeration, for example, first, second, and third here, and you drag and drop like that, you type in switch, it automatically populates the switch node with the correct number of inputs and case equal values. The reason why we do not have here, as you would expect, like first and second and third, that would make it a bit more explicit, is that there is no direct knowledge of the switch node of this enumeration type. So I will show you that if I add, for example, this fourth, you will see that this does not update the switch node. So if we did add any explicit naming, it might have confuse people into thinking that this node is supposed to be updated if the source enumeration changes. Yeah, so if I add, I'm in French. Yeah, so it creates the proper amount of inputs and cases. So for enumerations, it's a simple 0, 1, 2, 3, but yeah. Same thing goes for attributes. So if I change the input type to attributes and go in the effect interface, so yeah, it automatically populates the enum attributes here. If you convert like an input node from a property to an attribute, it will automatically populate the values. By the way, this is where you specify on the attribute node the enum list. So it has to be an integer, and the enumeration list it can be a single selection, multi-selection, so on. Yeah, and not so on either of those two. And the last feature I'd like to mention is a debug draw helper. So we already had some decimal value display templates in place. They were only in a few effects from the tutorials package. The reason why is that those templates were a bit hacky. We basically have for each of the integer digits and decimal part and the comma point a different billboard renderer. So in terms of performance, it was not ideal, but still a good debug helper that was present. And it also supported only one dimension, so scalars, one dimension values. In 2.15, however, you now have built-in debug draw templates. It's actually a script instruction, so it's in the debug namespace. I can show that in the compiler tab at the very end. You can see the debug.draw value instructions emitted. And by default, when you open an effect, you don't see anything, and that's normal. We want it to be explicit that those are. It's not either captured in the thumbnail. If you check, we want it to be explicit that this is debug only, and editor only, most importantly. If you want to display the values, you click here, and it just displays the values. A few different things, so it's using an opaque material. It's actually a bit more reliable, we find, but this might be configurable in the future. You can specify the tone scale, like the color, like side and up camera axis screen offset, and the alignment if you want it to be aligned on the left, on the right, for example, etc. In shipping, this is completely removed. The instruction is removed, and in the final engine, it will not be implemented. I mean, it will not be present either, unless the SDK integration handles it in terms of code. But it's actually really meant to be an editor-only thing. We plan to use these debug draw nodes extensively in the future in some of the core library templates. You'll hear more about that in future versions, but yeah, it's really meant to be, you use it, you debug your value, and you don't have to worry about it being shipped in the final game, while these templates were shipped in the final game, unless you explicitly remove them. So yeah, last comment on those. Right now, it's only implemented on the CPU backend. We will implement it in the GPU backend really soon. So that's all in terms of features. Maybe we can go back to Karen.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have any questions that we can answer about anything we've presented? Hello. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, as usual, you can find us on the Discord server, where we are pretty active.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a bit of lag between the stream and what I'm saying, so sorry about that. Yes, you can find us on the Discord. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to ask.
There is a question actually.
Oh yeah, so there is a question about Q2. So unfortunately, in the editor, you will not see
The
wireframe rendering of those draw calls, but it's actually a single draw call quad. So there is going to be a single draw call containing all of the float threes of whatever number of layers or debug draw value templates are present. Oh, actually, I'm showing. So we are still on the, yeah. So yeah, it's going to be a single quad containing all of the float 3, a single quad containing all of the integer 3, and so on. So basically, at most, you have 8 draw calls for all of the types we support. Yep. So it's very, very efficient. You can easily have hundreds of thousands of these, and it works correctly.
Maybe you can show hundreds of thousands of particles using these debug draw values.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was thinking just changing the multiplier node on this.
On this one?
Yeah. Because yeah, the goal is
unreadable.
Yeah, the goal is for it to be efficient, and so that you can actually debug lots of particles and not have too much of an impact on your simulation time.
Oh no, it's rotating. Sorry.
So of course it's completely unreadable, but yeah, I mean it would be useful even for effects with lots and lots of particles. You will be able to debug individually each particle with this.
Yeah, it's not anti-alias, but yeah, you can display lots of this. And it's actually a CPU instruction if you need to go into
yeah, anyway.
It's an instruction.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you everyone, and see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.